Man, I was hoping you'd still be yawning and scratching your shoulder when the camera went off to shoot the thumbnail.
Well, do you want to stop this and redo it?
Just stop the thing.
Yeah,
Sorry, people. We'll be right back in just a second.
Redo the thumbnail, and
I'll
just go
like that. So it looked like this movie turned Dave into a monkey. Okay, so real quick, convention plug. I'm gonna be myself and Doug are gonna be at Empire State Con in Albany, New York. I've never been to Albany before, so we're gonna be there from April the 6th through the 8th. That's Empire State Con. So stop by there if you're gonna be around the area or if you're planning on going. But we just got out.
I'll be in Springfield changing diapers. Please don't stop by.
Meanwhile, Doug will be changing my diapers. Well, usually I get con flu.
Yeah, well, you know.
It's not even true. I haven't been doing so many of these cons. I don't think I have gotten con flu in a few years now. We just got out of Pacific Rim Uprising, and we both reviewed the first movie as well.
Yeah.
And we were raved about the first one.
I loved the first one.
I did too.
The first, I've seen it several times since then because
I've just seen it.
I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll admit that, like, our initial review of it, I had very rose-colored glasses on because I'll be damned if that wasn't the movie I needed to see at the time.
Sure.
But, like, I'll admit that the first one has many flaws, but I still love the fuck out of it.
No, I did. I really did love the first movie. Granted, yeah, I haven't seen it since it came out, but I can say that about pretty much everything I go see nowadays. So with Pacific Rim 2, Pacific Rim Uprising, it takes place 10 years after the first one. And they do some interesting things at the beginning where, kind of briefly, but it's still kind of cool, it shows how society has basically been functioning for certain people in that 10 years. Like, there are cities that are just kind of abandoned and squatters stay in them. Like, squatters will stay in mansions and have big parties and things like that. And you're following around John Boyega, who plays the son of Idris Elba's character from the first movie. And they do some cool things where it's showing, like, this whole sort of black market trading scheme that they got going on for things like sriracha sauce and like Oreos and different things, and it's showing these different cons that he's doing as well, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that about the movie. And one thing that I liked better about this movie than the first one is John Boyega is the lead character. I thought he was a better lead than Charlie Hunnam in the first film.
And I like Charlie Hunnam in the first movie, but I will easily say that the big failing of the original is that the character work is very secondary.
I thought
very secondary.
Yeah, the character that Charlie Hunnam played in the first movie was just kind of there, but
He's a vanilla character.
I did think that the first one had a solid supporting cast at least between Ron Perlman and Charlie Day and the other guy who's in this movie, Herman, who's in this movie
the
too.
British fellow who was on Torchwood, and I can't remember his name either.
Yeah, who looks a little bit like Kenny.
Yeah.
This guy we know in Springfield from years ago.
Well, and what cracks me up about watching him in this movie, the dude's actually a really solid character actor, and he's so like nerdy and like withered in these movies. On Torchwood, he's like a badass.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen Torchwood.
It's a Doctor Who spinoff.
I know what it is. I just haven't seen it. So I thought some of the character work was a little bit better in this one, at least in terms of the lead. I liked John Boyega as the lead in this. I liked his character.
He had a lot more personality than Charlie Hunnam's character.
And I liked him better, and I liked John Boyega better in this than I did his character in Last Jedi.
You know what? This is a character that is a little less like hapless and just there, you know?
Yeah.
He's not the because in the new Star Wars trilogy, I feel like he's supposed to be kind of the everyman that the viewers can latch onto. And in this, he's not an everyman.
No, also, this one, he's the lead, so it's necessary he's there, whereas a lot of his stuff in Last Jedi felt very unnecessary.
Yeah.
Other than he's in the first one, so let's put him in this one. No, the first movie, I came out really loving it, on a high. Like, especially the kind of movie that it was. I felt like I hadn't loved a movie like that in a while.
A big, dumb sci-fi action movie.
Or at least like a big giant, in terms of like big giant robot movies and things like that. With this one, there was never a point in this movie that I was loving it, really. I certainly didn't come out of the movie in any kind of high or anything.
It wasn't boring, but it certainly wasn't as thrilling. Like,
no.
It didn't have that, like, that reaction I had to the first one, where I was, like, there were parts of the first one where I remember watching it in the theater where, like, I was gripping the seat handle just because I was so excited to be watching it, you know?
Yeah. This movie really doesn't have anything like that in it. Although what I will say about this movie, because there's plenty of good things I could say about this movie, what I'll say about it is it's basically a better version of Independence Day Resurgence.
Kinda, yeah. Yeah.
And that last Transformers movie that just came out. It's better than, I mean, granted, this isn't saying much, but it's certainly better than a lot of different movies that are in this genre that are out now. It's better than Resurgence. It's a lot better than any of the 5 Transformers movies. It's not. I did not think this was as good as like Kong Skull Island, but I probably liked it better than Gareth Edwards' Godzilla. But there are things. What I enjoyed in the first, because I liked the first half of this movie, or the first 3/4 of it, way better than I did the last act of the movie.
Well, and that's the thing. It was for me, the first 3/4 of this movie I thought were good.
Yeah.
But the whole time I was sitting there thinking was like, okay, they're doing so much character work, which is great.
Yeah.
But it better have a fucking payoff.
Uh-huh.
And sadly, it didn't.
No, it really doesn't.
It really doesn't have a payoff.
And before
any of the groundwork they lay.
Honestly, the tease it does at the end is the same one from Resurgence.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're making this movie for a global audience, certainly, and maybe there'll be enough there to where there'll be another part of this way sooner than there'll be another Independence Day. But no, I'm with you on that, because for the first 3/4 of this movie, I was along with it. There was never a point where I was loving the movie necessarily, but the first one did feel very much like a big budget version of something like Robot Jocks, and this one very much so. This one, in the first 3/4 of the movie, does feel like, from the characters to the plot to even how some of the action was done, albeit on a bigger budget, it feels like a big budget Charles Band movie. And I was going along with it in that mindset. I was like, all right, this is like a big budget modern version of something I would have stumbled across on Cinemax or Showtime back in like 1993. And I was enjoying it in that regard. There was enough good lines with the lead, and there was enough over-the-top stuff between the lead and some of the supporting characters. But you're right, man. When it got to that last act, it was exhausting.
No, and that's the thing. It was, you know, none of the problems I've had with giant robot movies in the past few years. Like, it was cleanly directed.
No, it was.
Everything made sense.
Yeah.
But there was there's no stakes to it.
It felt very, okay, there would be some cool stuff that would happen in the fight scene. A couple of things. Like, how they kind of throw buildings at each other, and even a scene early on where they roll up all of these cars and throw it at one of them. Every now and then, something like that would happen, but it'd be pretty quick. And I could tell what was going on in the fight scenes. I could. Yeah. I was never confused by any of the editing or the filmmaking, but there wasn't enough beyond just their fighting each other. It felt really... been there, done that.
Yeah, yeah, and it was one of those. It was one of those things. It's like, okay, we know they're gonna triumph in the end. Like, we know that going in. So that's not the kind of stakes I'm talking about. It's just that it didn't. Like, it was like, okay, in 3 minutes they're gonna win.
No, yeah, okay, yeah, like, so, like, this is happening now,
Yeah.
like, that kind of thing. No, I completely agree, and there wasn't enough interesting stuff going on in the scenes to carry me through it. Like, I was exhausted, and after a while, kind of bored during the whole last act of this movie. Most of the dialogue in it is things you've seen before, where it's shouting in a control room, and it's just action movie dialogue where they'll crash zoom, there'll be like Dutch angles, they'll smash zoom on someone. It's a lot of like now go kick his ass, or talk to me people, or like look alive folks. Like it's a lot of that.
Had that too, but the first one also, like, you know, even though it was a giant robot movie, it was directed by Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
And even though the character work wasn't great, in fact, I'd say of Guillermo del Toro's movies, it had the worst character work I've seen in any of his movies.
Mm.
But at the same time, it was like in that movie, it had a certain sense of style and a certain there was a way that he directed where the scope felt so big that it was engaging. And in this, the scope isn't there.
Uh-huh.
Like there's arguably probably more destruction and more like big things happening. But I think the way he directed the first movie, where there's a lot of angles from shooting up, seeing like how big these things are, and in this it really felt like some of the fight scenes, it's like, so we're watching someone spend a lot of money to make their like Ultraman movie.
Like, oh yeah.
You know?
In the first one though, whenever like the fight scenes were shot better and they were a bit more gripping. There was also fun stuff it was kind of cutting back to between the stuff in the first one with Charlie Day and also Ron Perlman.
Yeah.
And in this, a couple of times in the climax, it's cutting back to Charlie Day, who actually has a big part of the plot that's going on here. And that stuff I did like, because Charlie Day is going full-on Christian Slater in this movie.
Yeah, they're like, here's some scenery, do your best to chew on it, buddy.
Yeah, and he did really, really well at that. I mean, Charlie Day's really good at doing that in about any context. Yeah. But there wasn't enough cutting back to him really in this.
That's the thing. There's this big reveal, and we're going to get into spoilers now, and I don't give a shit. Where basically Charlie Day's character has been mind-fucking a kaiju brain for a while.
Yeah.
And so he's somewhat possessed by the evil overlords seen very briefly at the end of the first movie. And only because I've watched that movie so many times did I really understand that. Like, it was obvious that they wanted to put in a villain with a face.
Yeah.
And so they picked Charlie Day, and that's great. And they gave a logical reason. But I don't think they spent more time focusing on these fucking teenagers than they did on what could have been the most interesting story in the movie.
Come on, man. You didn't like Russian nesting doll Scarlett Johansson is the...
So you saw that too, okay.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, there's this whole subplot where John Boyega, like, meets and runs into this girl who built her own, like, mini Jaeger.
Yeah.
And she gets drafted in the military, and she's not getting along, and it's kind of her story too, but... who gives a fuck?
That's why I mentioned earlier that this is like the better Transformers 5, because she's a lot like that girl from that movie.
It's like, I you know, like, it's cool that they had like a female co-lead. She didn't need to be a fucking teenager. And in fact, that story didn't need to be there. They could have made John Boyega's character female and had it be a female-led movie, and that would have been the same effect, but to better purpose.
I didn't have a problem with her, really, but I do agree.
The girl was fine. It was just unnecessary to the overall story, you know?
Sure, I mean, it could be something you could lose. I'm sure you could, but when I was thinking about that stuff you could lose, it wasn't really so much that.
No, there was other like, weird, like, barely mentioned love interest.
What was that? Exactly. Yeah. That's in this for, I'm not joking, maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, and like, yeah, you get a gag out of it, but it's a gag that has no oomph because there's no...
Because it was random.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it's a gag where they just told you the punchline and there was no setup to it. Like, who is this? Okay, I guess there's a love story. Sort of? Not really? What was that?
Yeah, I think they were trying to set up tension between John Boyega and Eastwood's boy.
Scott Eastwood,
who, you know what? I'm going to say, like, I've seen him in enough shit now. I actually really liked him in this.
I like Scott Eastwood.
He's not a great actor,
Uh-huh.
but at the same time, he's one of those dudes that really reminds me of, like, the mid to late 90s, where a guy who is an okay actor, somewhat good looking, but still somewhat kind of rough looking. It's like...
He would have been
like,
the lead in one of the Charles Band robot movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah.
But he's a dude that is like, man, okay, don't make any more Nicholas Sparks movie and or be basically a background actor in Suicide Squad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But he was a good straight man for John Boyega.
No, he was. Did they mention Charlie Hunnam's character at all?
Not at all.
They didn't?
No.
I didn't know if I missed it. Like,
if they did, I didn't catch it either.
And even part of me, like, at first was like, is Scott Eastwood playing?
Nope.
And I double checked that, and yeah, you're right. No, but I was like, but I haven't seen the first one since it first came out, so I was like, I know he didn't die.
But they referenced the blonde Russian pilot from the first one.
Oh yeah. So I missed that, if that happened in this movie, and I didn't know if I just simply missed it because I couldn't remember his character's name. It's like Raleigh something, and I only know that not by memory because I was just on the IMDb page. But whenever that happens with Charlie Day, where that reveal happens, and even kind of the build up before it gets to that reveal, I was like, this is going somewhere interesting. I'm curious about where this is all leading to. And what it leads to is just some shots of Charlie Day on a rooftop playing with an iPad stuff, playing with an iPad. I'm like, man, there should be more here. There should be more here with this.
Well, and if he's like truly like let's get into that like sharing a mind thing a little bit with him more. Like they did a weird like voice dub thing with him,
just so you'd kind of get the point that he's possessed.
But at the same time, it's like I don't necessarily need a physical transformation because that wouldn't make sense. But let's have a little more of a personality transformation.
Yeah,
because he was still playing essentially the same character.
Yeah,
but a little more manic and a little less nervous.
Yeah,
like they like fucking let's take it over the top, guys. Like this is the kind of movie. Very few kind of movies where you can take it over the top and it's okay to do it. This is one of them. Yeah,
I was disappointed that it didn't go that full over the top in the last 30 plus minutes of this movie.
He needed some Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, he did. He really did. And it sets it up for that because there are moments where the movie just in the last act didn't give him enough time to do that. Whereas in the first 75% of the movie, it did. There are a lot of really fun moments with him. It's showing when he's first introduced and he's kind of cocky because of the events from the first movie. I enjoyed that. I did. I did. I was okay with this movie. Like, I mean, yeah, I've got my issues with it. I
wasn't bored, and if you like the first one, it's certainly worth seeing. But I mean, it's just it's one of those weird cases of a sequel that it feels so different from the first one, and it did some things better, but it did other things worse, and it's just...
And the things that it did worse are the things that make this a much lesser movie. I don't think this is a bad movie. I don't. For the most part, I was entertained by this. For the most part, I was fine with it. Like I said, like in this mindset of watching just a big screen version of, again, something like Crash and Burn or Robot Wars. And so I wish it was a little more than what it was, but if you liked the first one or loved the first one, I can't imagine this movie would be on par with that, but you might be fine with it. If you didn't like the first one, you'll come out of this probably with the same feeling that you had about the first one.
And
really.
if you love the first one like I do in a weird like I love that fucking movie. And I know it's far from perfect, but I fucking love it. It was a slight disappointment. There were things about it I did really enjoy. There's things about it that bummed me out a little. It's like, okay, you were talking earlier about how, like, in the beginning you liked how they were doing the black market thing and stuff.
Oh, I did, yeah.
All right. Well, in my opinion, I know it's a different character and probably a different city and shit like that. But in the first movie, they established what the black markets are like.
I don't remember. It's been 5 years.
That was all Ron Perlman.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it didn't have any of that. Like, this movie felt way more vanilla than the first one. Because it does. It didn't have any of that weirdness that the first one had.
Yeah.
It doesn't, because it is very, like, it's kind of vanilla.
Yeah.
Like, the first one, yeah, it's a big robot action movie, but when you get down to the people, some of the shit that was going on was just plain weird.
Yeah, and that's part of why the first one was so cool. Yeah, that's part of what made me so into the first one.
Like, in the first one where they're all, like, you know, like, tearing apart the old kaijus and using parts on the black market and shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, then it shows John Boyega living in a half-demolished mansion next to a kaiju skeleton, and it's like...
Yeah.
You know... The way the black market works in our world right now, there's no way that shit wouldn't be harvested. Mm-hmm. Somebody would be snorting to get their dick hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it could. It did certainly could have used more of that at the beginning of this movie, but it was something I guess I appreciated more than I did 100% love the execution of it. But yeah. But I liked that setup of the movie. I did. I mean, it helped that I really liked John Boyega in this movie. And it did make it feel like just like a B movie from the early 1990s, late 80s. No, overall, this is one that I could recommend as like just like for a cheap seat theater. Because it is a big screen movie, like, and then the 3D was fine.
Well, we saw it in the IMAX, and I'll be honest, the shit I've seen in our IMAX, like, visually, this was the most impressive to me. Like,
what was the other one you saw?
I've seen a couple things in
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few things in there now.
And like, I thought it was worth seeing on a big... It's definitely worth seeing on a big screen. And personally, you know, I would have paid full price to see it and not felt bad about it. Like, it's just... It's one of those things that if you're in the mood for mindless... It's a good choice right now.
Sure, I mean, it's better than, like I said, that last... or any of the recent Transformers movies, but those 5 movies, and it was way better than Resurgence. But I don't know if I could recommend this as a full price movie, but I didn't come out of this movie mad at all. I came out fine with the movie. I thought it was okay. It had enough stuff for me to recommend about the movie, but it feels more like something that you'd be more satisfied with seeing on the cheap seats, but that's just me.
Yeah, the longer we're out of it, it's just hitting me more and more that it's just not resonating, you know?
I'm not going to feel the need to see this movie again.
Oh, no. You know, like, if they make a third one and it's amazing...
Giant robot movies here.
God damn it, Laura!
But any final thoughts about this? I got another movie I gotta see.
It's okay.
Hey, we're just killing time before God's Not Dead 3 next week.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's okay, and I think that's when we have the most trouble reviewing a movie and we get off on tangents where it makes it probably sound worse than it is, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's not okay. It's not good. Well, it's not bad. And it's not great. It's okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, everyone. Thanks a bunch for watching. See you later.